Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. Alright, hello guys. So today we are doing a Q&A section around training for hiking. Now, the other day I put a shout out to my email newsletter. I said, look, I'm thinking of doing a question and answer episode in the podcast. So if anyone does have any questions, fire them my way and I will do a podcast on them. And we got some really cool questions from a few different hikers out there, and we're going to be just talking through them today. So we're going to be talking about a little bit about avoiding injury in the upper body while hiking. We're going to be talking about balancing out your training and your strength. We're going to be talking about getting stronger for the longer through hikes, looking after your feet, and also doing elevation training. So a little bit to get through, and we've got some real quality stuff coming up. So the very first question I want to cover is from Amanda, and she was asking what strategies are there to avoid injury to the neck or shoulders from the weight of carrying a backpack and the repetitive motion of using trekking poles. And also, if it happens, what recovery strategies can you do if you do happen to hurt yourself? Now, this is a really typical question I hear from a lot of hikers, because we always talk about lower body training, but sometimes the upper body stuff does get neglected. And then when we've got a heavier pack on our back, or when we're using poles for the first time or for a longer time, we can get pretty tired and pretty sore. So there are a few bits and pieces you want to do. Now, essentially, first and foremost, in regards to your training and avoiding this type of thing, is making sure you are doing some type of upper body training in your week. So you're not just sticking to your lower body stuff. You're not just doing your squats, your lunges, your glute bridges, all of that, but you are fitting in a bit of upper body training as well. Now, typically what I recommend to break up your upper body training for a typical hiker is thinking about balancing out your motions between pushing and pulling motions. So a pulling motion might be something where you're doing a row, so rowing something to, from out towards your back, or from something starting your arms above your head and pulling down. Anything that's a pulling motion. And then a pushing motion is when you're doing sort of a push-up motion or pushing something above your head. Now, essentially, each week in your training, you want to fit in at least one pulling motion and at least one pushing motion. If you're doing, 3 or 4 sessions of strength training, you might do 2 pulling and 2 pushing motions exercises in your week. And then slowly but surely, you'll build that up. So typical examples of here for a pulling motion, you might start off with a TRX row or a pack row. For your pushing motion, you might do, an incline push-up, like off a bench or off a box, or a normal push-up, and slowly but surely do a few more reps or do a few more exercises on that. And that could be a really good place to start, and most hikers should be doing something there. And that will also help you with those trekking poles, because the biceps, triceps often do get a bit tired when you're doing your hiking with the poles. So doing that push-pull motion will make sure you're hitting those areas. Now, on top of that, if you are sort of getting injury or pain in these areas, typically something that's happening is often, for 90% of the population, as a really rough number, a lot of us are what's called upper trap dominant, meaning the upper part of our neck. We do a lot of hunching over, we do a lot of leaning over a desk or looking at our phone, and the upper parts of our neck tend to get pretty tight. Alternatively, the muscles that actually attach to the neck and these traps, they do travel very, all the way down to your mid-back, and they're known as the lower traps. In an ideal world, those lower traps will do a significant portion of stabilizing your scapula and doing, shoulder support. But for a lot of us, the upper traps just get way too strong, they're just way too active, and the lower traps don't do a huge amount of work. So what you can do in your training and in your warm-ups, you can do a little bit of work around building up the strength in these lower traps and building up this stability around your scapula. So really simple exercises you can do, which you can plug into YouTube, or you can come find in the Training for Hiking and Trekking group. You can do something like WYTs, where you're really looking for a strong scapular position and slowly going through a few motions while you're challenging that stability. You can do something like wall slides, where you're sort of next to a wall, you've got a mini band around your wrists and you're slowly pushing your arms up and down. It's a little bit hard to describe on the podcast, but if you want to see some examples of that, come on the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group, and I'll put a few videos up on that. Now that's on the training side of things initially. And what you can do when you're actually on the trail, one super easy way of going about minimizing this is essentially sticking to an intensity where you can continually breathe through your nose and concentrating on abdominal breathing, where you're breathing in, feeling the belly expand as opposed to chest and shoulders going too high. Now, the reason why I say this is essentially if you can stick to this intensity and you can concentrate on that type of breathing, you're going to be, number one, not getting too huffed and puffed. But number two, there isn't going to be a huge amount of motion through your upper body and through your neck and shoulders. Alternatively, if you're getting really huffed and puffed and you are constantly breathing in the neck and the shoulders, what that's going to do is every time you do a huff and puff, your shoulders are going to do a slight shrug and your chest is going to do a slight shrug. And it might not be a big deal day to day, but when you're doing that for hours and hours and hours on the trail with a pack on your back, doing that tiny little shrug, it can really, really fatigue those muscles. And if you go beyond that, it can lead into a bit of pain. So focusing on that lower intensity nose breathing, trying to concentrate on having your belly expand as much as it can when breathing in, as opposed to the chest and shoulders doing all the work, can be a really, really good strategy there. Now on your gear, should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, is make sure your pack is sitting right. If your neck and shoulders are getting sore, probably your pack isn't quite fit right 100% for you. So I'd highly recommend go down to a local travel store, an adventure store, get it fitted. If you had that done in the past, and it was a few years ago, go get it fitted again because, the straps do get loose, things do go out of whack. And essentially you want to be taking as much pressure off the chest and the shoulders as you can with that particular situation. Now, in Amanda's situation, she was asking, what recovery strategies can you do if injury does occur? Now, if this is an injury, if it's a sharp pain or if it's been hanging around for a while, go see a physio, go see a physical therapist, get a diagnosis because you need, these things can hang around for ages if they are an issue. So go and see someone. Alternatively, if it's not that bad, it's just a general ache and it's just, a little bit uncomfortable. A few things you can do is generally gentle movement is going to be good and going to help it recover. So doing a little bit of rolling around the area, very, very gentle and light. You don't have to be aggressive here, but getting a massage ball or a foam roller, depending on where the soreness is, doing some really, really gentle rolling on that area. And then around the area, like where it's not actually sore, like above and below, doing a little bit of harder rolling. And that can give it a bit of relief. And doing that once a day or something. Doing some gentle swimming and just going through the motions where you're getting your body moving and it's, a bit of a low intensity environment can be pretty effective. And also doing some really, really light strength training. So nothing that's going to be strenuous, nothing that's going to strain you. But again, going through the motions with light weights, getting the blood moving, it can accelerate the recovery process there. So there's a few bits and pieces. So Amanda, hopefully that answers your question. And for anyone else who does struggle with their necks and their shoulders getting sore when carrying a backpack, hopefully that gives you a bit of insight there. Now, the next question was from Lynn, and she was asking, she would love to know what is kinder on the feet and legs, stiff sole or soft sole in boots or runners for general trail hiking. Now, Lynn, I'm going to disappoint you here and I can't give you a clear answer on that in particular, purely for the fact that everyone's feet and everyone's body are different. And one answer is probably not going to suit you without really knowing what's going on. So what I'd highly recommend, if this isn't a recurring issue for you and you're like, look, my feet and my legs always get sore, go and see a podiatrist and just get their opinion. And they'll be able to look at your feet, the way you walk, and just give you an opinion on that and for you and give you some really insight and direction. So that's first and foremost on that. Now, what I can do to help you in this situation, what I can recommend is for anyone who are getting feet and legs getting sore on the trail or getting a little bit uncomfortable, there's a few things that I'd highly recommend. Now, number one, strengthening up the calves is never going to be a bad thing. And putting some focus into strengthening your calf muscles can be super, super effective at taking pressure off the feet, taking pressure off the legs and keeping you happy. So what I'd recommend here is doing a combination of straight leg calf raises and bent leg calf raises. So the straight leg calf raises is essentially working the calf muscles a little bit higher on the calf. And essentially you'd be up against a wall or on a step, legs straight, you drop your heel down the floor and then push up to your toes. Really, really simple. The bent leg version is working muscles, the calf muscles, which are a little bit lower, a little bit deeper, but they are just as important. And essentially they only get activated when you've got your legs are bent and you're going through this motion. So what you do the same calf raise, but you bend your knees and then go through the calf raise motion. Again, describing these exercises can be a little bit tricky on the podcast format. So if you want to find out more, come to the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. I can put examples around that. And essentially, you want to be training your calves, maybe doing exercises maybe 2, 3, 4 times a week, and stick with that for 4 to 6 weeks, and it will make a difference, I guarantee you. So that's first step. Number 2 is stretching your calves. Now, unless you're hypermobile and you're aware of that, more than likely, if you get sore feet, sore legs, adding some extra calf mobility is going to be good for you. So doing regular stretches on your calves and holding it for 60 seconds or more, and doing that every single day or every second day, and doing that for 4 to 6 weeks, and likely that will make a difference as well. Now, just holding a stretch for 15, 20 seconds, it might feel good, but it's probably not going to really change much. And just doing it randomly every once in a while, again, it's probably not going to change much. So you do need to be proactive here. You do need to be a little bit more dedicated, but that can be a really good area to look at. The next step you might look at is actually strengthening up the feet muscles, the foot muscles, I should say, which actually do get a little bit neglected. And sometimes if they're not quite strong enough, the feet can get a little bit sore. Now, you can do all types of crazy, exercises here. But one really, really simple one you can do is literally up on your tippy toes and just walk back and forth on your tippy toes and do 20 steps forward, 20 steps back. And then you go up into your heels. So instead of being on your toes, you're up on your heels, you're pulling your toes up, and you do 20 steps forward, 20 steps back like that. And doing that a few times a week. And that simply by itself can be pretty effective at strengthening up some of the foot muscles. And that can be a good thing to throw into your routine. Again, if you want to learn a little bit more about the foot strengthening or see some of those exercises in action, come find the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. And then finally on this front is strengthening up the legs in general are always going to be beneficial to make the feet feel happier, purely for the fact that your legs act as force absorbers. Meaning every single step you take, if the leg muscles are strong enough, they will absorb a lot of the force and therefore the feet won't take quite as much. However, if the legs are not strong enough or they fatigue early, then they begin to fail, the force absorption isn't so effective, and slowly but surely the feet take more and more and more. So if you are in the situation where your feet or your legs are struggling, strengthen up the calves, stretch the calves, strengthen the feet, and strengthen the legs, and also go see a podiatrist to figure out which type of shoes it may be better for you. So sorry, Eileen, I couldn't answer your specific question, but hopefully it gives you a few ideas here. Now, next question was, how do I balance out cardio, strength workouts with my hiking days? So this is an interesting question because it can be very, very tricky to sort of fit everything into your week, particularly if you're an active hiker and you aren't getting out hiking most weekends or all of that. So generally what I recommend is hiking is always going to be the priority. This is what we love and do. We don't want to be sacrificing our hiking for our training. We want to be training to help our hiking. So hiking always goes in the calendar first and put that in there. And then essentially you look into your week and see, all right, what other days can I commit to training? Generally what I want to see in a week, as a minimum, you want to see one strength session and one specific cardio session, which may be loaded pack walking, it may be bike intervals, it may be hill walking or whatever it may be. If you can only train twice in a week, you probably want to be looking at one strength session, one cardio session, and then you're hiking. If you can train 3 times in the week, I would probably recommend doing 2 strength sessions, 1 cardio session, and you're hiking. If you can train 4 times in your week, 2 cardio sessions, 2 strength sessions. In those cardio sessions, one of them are going to be on your feet, so hills, loaded pack walks, something like that, and one of them are going to be off your feet. So on the elliptical, maybe on the stationary bike or cycling, maybe one swimming. If you're going to train 5 times a week, I'd probably still recommend keeping to 2 cardio, 2 strength workouts, and doing 1 super, super gentle, low intensity active recovery session. Generally, I find that works out pretty well for most people. If you're doing extended hikes, so if you're doing, 2, 3, 4 days or something like that, then you're just going to simply reduce stuff down. If you're doing extra hiking, you can sacrifice your cardio days and just maintain your strength. And just play around with that. So that's generally what I'd recommend there. It can be a balancing act, and it will change from day to day, depending on week to week, I should say, depending on how much hiking you're doing, how much energy you have, what time you commit to your sessions. But that's a general recommendation, what I like to work off. Now, next questions were from Kay as well. And basically the next one was, how can I get stronger for long through hikes? For example, looking at 15 plus miles per day for multiple days. And this is a tricky subject because, it's not really realistic to replicate this in our day-to-day or week-to-week life unless we're actually going on a through hike. And training, 15 plus days, multiple days, and actually doing that in our training is not realistic. It's not going to happen for most of us. Some people can do it, but it's not going to happen. So generally what I recommend here, 4 things you want to look at. Number 1 is, first and foremost, you want to get comfortable doing the top mileage that you're aiming for on these through hikes in a single day. So if your longest day you're expecting is 20 miles, you need to work up to be able to do that in one day. Because if you can't do it in one day, you're never going to be able to do it in multiple days. So that's first and foremost. Essentially 2 weeks before your major through hike that you planned, you want to be making sure you're comfortable with your top mileage 2 weeks beforehand. So generally, I'd recommend getting out the calendar, having a look at those dates, saying 2 weeks before this hike, this is the practice hike, I'm going to do a 20-mile day, and then looking at your calendar and your schedule, working backwards and slowly work that distance down till today's date. That's first and foremost. Second is we want to get comfortable doing more pack weight than you're expecting on this through hike on shorter days. So if you're on your through hike, your 15 plus mile days, and you're expecting a 10 kilo or 20 pound pack, then essentially in your training, when we're doing shorter hikes, which may only be 8, 6, 10 miles, something like that, you probably want to get used to carrying a 15 kilo pack or a 30 pound pack, whatever those conversions are. You want to be sort of getting yourself comfortable in that way, because we can't always get out for these massive training hikes, but you can add extra stimulus and extra challenge by adding pack weight and getting yourself used to that. So therefore, when you get onto those longer hikes and you've got day to day, but you've got the lighter pack on the back, the body is sort of adapted and gotten used to this heavy weight. And that can be very, very effective. So if you can only get out once a month to do a longer training hike and all your other hikes are shorter, then you want to be loading up that pack weight a little bit heavier than you expect to give yourself that challenge. The third step is you want to get comfortable doing even more pack weight than that when you're doing your elevation training. So if you're preparing for a through hike, you probably at some stage want to be doing some type of training on some stairs, on some hills, on the stepper at the gym, or at least on the incline treadmill. And in this situation, you want to be getting the body used to carrying even more weight. So if you got a 10 kilo pack on this through hike and you're training up to a 15 kilo pack, maybe on this particular elevation training, which you might only be doing for 30 minutes to 60 minutes, you might be training with a 20 kilo pack. And therefore you can really, really overload the muscles in a controlled environment where you're not out in the middle of nowhere, but in a controlled environment, you can overload the muscles and really add some extra challenge there. So that's probably what I'd recommend as well. And then finally, get strong. If you're not doing strength training already, you're not working through a structured strength program, this is the easiest thing you can do, the simplest thing you can do to get yourself more comfortable getting through these longer days, to make sure you're resilient so the body doesn't fall apart, to help your body back up day to day. So get comfortable doing your top mileage in a single day, get comfortable doing more pack weight on your shorter hiking days, get comfortable doing even more pack weight on your elevation training, and just simply get strong. That'll typically get you in a pretty good position for any type of through hike distances you're looking at. And obviously, the distances, intensities, and that will change from person to person. Now, the next question was also from Kay, and she was asking, how can I take care of my feet? So I'm going to assume this isn't about blisters, but this is more about just making sure they don't fall apart on these, multi-day hikes. Generally, 2 things beyond all the training we talked about before. So what I was talking about when we were talking about Lynn stuff and where we strengthen everything up. When you're actually on the trail, 2 sort of things that I'd recommend doing to help with this. Now, number 1, at the end of the day, and maybe even lunchtime as well, being proactive with some self-care on your feet. Meaning, get your hiking pole, get your water bottle, get a cork massage bowl, which I recommend any hiker brings, and just doing a little bit of rolling. Roll out your feet, roll your calves, and roll your shins as well. Spending 2 minutes on each of those sections, so that's 6 minutes on one side, 6 minutes on one leg, 6 minutes on the other, at the end of the day or even at lunch, is a really, really good way of being proactive about looking after your feet, helping everything, recover as well as it can, and staying on top of that. The second thing I'd recommend is in the morning, when you wake up, before you roll out of your tent, doing a really, really simple morning routine. Now, this is one I specifically give to my clients with plantar fasciitis who struggle with morning pain in the morning. Who struggle with pain in the morning. Really, really simple, takes you 3 minutes. Before you roll out of bed, what you want to do is grab your foot and you want to do 5 really, really big, slow, exaggerated circles in a clockwise direction. So really, really slow, really testing the limits of your mobility, really controlled, 5 big circles in a clockwise direction. And then you're going to go the other way, 5 big circles in an anti-clockwise direction. Really slow, really exaggerated, really, really trying to push the limits there. Then you're going to do 5 big toe points. So pushing out your toe as far as you can go, hold that end point for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then really, really pull your foot the other way and hold that end point for 2 to 3 seconds. And you're going to do 5 of that. Really, really point it, really, really pull it. 5 of that. And then you just spend 30 seconds getting your thumbs and just digging into your feet and just giving a little bit of massage. Just pushing in, feeling small spot, 2 thumbs, bang, 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 bang. As much as if you're hiking, your feet might be a bit grotty, but that can be really effective. Do that one foot, do that the other foot. It takes 3 minutes, really, really good morning routine. And I highly recommend any hiker gets around it. And then finally, if you are aware that this is an issue and the UI is going to give you trouble, I'd probably recommend bringing a set of compression recovery socks, not just compression socks which you wear in the plane, but compression recovery socks which you buy at a sports store or whatever that, and either wearing it around camp at night or while you sleep if that's not too uncomfortable. Really, really easy and effective way of just giving the feet a little bit more comfort, a little extra recovery, and it can be very, very effective. And then the final question I want to talk about, hopefully that covered all Kay's stuff and hopefully she's happy with those answers. The final question I want to answer today was from Parul, and he was asking, what are the best exercises and techniques to use to climb up and downhill several times on the same hill? So what I think you're asking here, Parul, is about hill training when you're doing hill intervals and what's sort of the best way you can go about going up and down that hill in your training to get the most out of it. So I'm going to answer that. I think that's what you asked, and I will cover that. But essentially, obviously, hill training can be really, really good. We talked about it previously in this podcast. Great way of adding elevation in your training. First and foremost, if you're doing hill training, use your hiking poles, your trekking poles. Really, really effective in helping you work harder going up and protect your joints on the way down. So first and foremost, use your poles. Second, on the way up, when you're climbing up a hill, number 1, try to plant your feet as you're going up and plant your heel. So as opposed to being up on our toes, which we often do when we're climbing, the calves will really, really burn out and they'll fatigue very quickly there. But try to actually get your whole foot on the ground and push up through your heel. And that'll get some of the bigger muscles involved. That'll just give the calves a little bit of rest, and that can be really, really effective. That is tricky if your calves are super tight. So if you cannot do that, that's probably an indication you need to work on your calf mobility. But planting your feet on the way up, very effective. Number 2, when you're going on the way up in these hill intervals, I generally recommend trying to stick to that nose breathing pace and intensity and try to maintain that intensity where you're not getting outrageously huffed and puffed going up the hill, but you can stick to that nose breathing. Now, the intention behind that's going to minimize our intensity, keep us relatively fuel efficient, and it can be a really good habit to learn to help you on the trail when you're going out. And then if it is too easy for you with that pace, you're going to add a loaded pack. Now, on the way down, the best piece of advice is just never rush. Take your time. Don't feel like you have to do timed intervals with the way down, with your rest period. It's not worth slipping over and hurting yourself. Use your poles, take your time, be smart with that. And then finally, if you are using load, so if you are using a loaded pack and you don't do an extended ascent, and you're aware that like your feet, shins, your knee, your back can sometimes get a little bit sore, I'd highly recommend trying to find a hill with a water source down the bottom, and you load up your pack with water bottles or a dry bag full of water, climb up the top, empty all your water at the top, or at least half your water at the top, walk back down the bottom and then refill there. Now, the beauty of this is it gives you the stimulus going up with the extra load, but on the way down, we take a lot of extra pressure through our joints, and every extra kilo we carry adds a whole bunch of extra pressure. So on the way down, if you're emptying out that water, that's going to be very effective at saving your joints. So I'd highly recommend you go about that. And actually, there's one more question which I wanted to cover, which I just almost missed there. But this question was from Claire, who's actually working through one of the programs. And basically, she was working through, her question was, My last training program had me carrying a loader pack up to 18 kilos, which was essentially, on a loader pack walk, about 60 minutes walking around the neighborhood, something I typically recommend to a lot of people. Now, she said she understood the reasoning behind this, and yada, yada, yada. And she was just asking now in the next phase of her training, she's doing hill intervals, but her pack weight's now gone down to 7 kilos when she was previously working with 18 kilos. And she was wondering what the rationale behind that is. And essentially what I generally recommend for people when they're transitioning from flat training to elevation training is just to be safe with the weight you're adding. As I just said previously, for every extra kilo you carry on the way downhill, your body, so your knees, your feet, take a hugely disproportionate amount of extra force. So what may be comfortable walking around on the flat, if you start doing repeated descents on a steep hill or a steep set of stairs, it can grind you up pretty quickly. So generally what I recommend to hikers when they're transitioning from flat loaded pack walking to actually specific elevation training is to significantly drop your weight, to play it safe. If you get through the first couple of sessions and you're like, you know what, I feel good, I'm pulling up fine, and this is easy, that's absolutely fine. And then you can start increasing your weight. But it's better to be safe than sorry in this situation. So for Claire, we went down from 18 kilos down to 7 kilos. Then each week we're going to go 7, 8, 9, 10. She might come back to me and say, actually, Rowan, 7 kilos are way too easy. I was feeling really, really good. We might bump that up to 10 or 11 and start building up from there. But as a rule of thumb for anyone who's transitioning from loaded pack walking to elevation training, be conservative with your weight on the first week or two of your elevation training. And it's better to be safer than sorry. So there we go, guys, a few bits and pieces we worked through today. Hopefully that gives you a few good insights into maybe some questions you've pondered in the past, maybe some things you come across. Hopefully you've gotten some good value out of this episode today. Now, if you weren't curious about any of the exercises that I've mentioned in this podcast, as I said before, it can be a bit tricky to describe it in the audio format. So if you did want to actually get an insight, see some videos, see some tutorials, you can come and find me in the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. Inside there, I'm always happy to share extra information, go into detail, give video tutorials and all of that. So if you did want to check it out, the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group, you can find that in the show notes below, the link for that, and you can find me there. So thank you so much for listening. Hope you got a bit out of it, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.